Hello there. Welcome to the WordofGord. Today we're pursuing our adventures out of body once again in the etheric realms and the astral realms. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 26, I believe. And I'm going to go back to a book I've read from before, Letters from the Light, written automatically, as was the habit in those days of 100 years ago. Automatic writing was common. And Elsa Barker did so, 1914, 1913, 1914. And the spirit whom she was channeling by that method was a relatively advanced spirit who passed on with knowledge of karma and reincarnation. And that always helps when you get to the other world. Now, our friend Jürgen Zhu was talking recently in his book Vistas of Infinity of contacting the spirits of a young woman who was about to reincarnate and become, she was assured, a sales assistant. So I remembered there was a similar encounter with the spirit communicating in this book. And it's a child that he met who became quite bonded with, quite friendly with, and who very soon decided he was going to reincarnate. And here's the account of that. The passing of Lionel. I have lost my boy Lionel. He has gone. I started to say the way of all flesh, but I must revise the figure and say the way of all spirits. Sooner or later, and that way is back to earth. One day not long ago I found him absorbed in thought in our favourite resting place, the little hut beside a stream at the foot of a wooded hill, which I told you about in one of my former letters. I waited for a time until the boy opened his eyes and looked at me. Father, he said, my favourite teacher is going to be married tomorrow. How do you know? I asked. Why, I have been listening, he answered. Every little while I go back and pay her a visit, though she does not know I am there. I have been aware that there was something in the wind. Why? Because she has been so shining. There is a light around her which was not there before. What caused the light, Lionel? Well, I suppose she is what they call in love. You are a phenomenally wise child, I said. He looked at me with his large, honest eyes. I am not really a child at all, he answered. I am as old as the hills, as you, or as anybody. Have you not told me that we are all immortal without end or beginning? Yes, but go on, tell me about your teacher. She is in love with the big brother of one of my playfellows. I used to know him when I was a little boy. He let me use his magnet and taught me kite flying and showed me how machinery went. He is an engineer. Oh, I said. In this case, of course you are glad that your favourite teacher is going to marry him. Lionel's eyes were larger than ever as he said, I shall be sorry to leave you, but it is a chance I cannot afford to miss. What? It is my opportunity to go back. I have been watching for a very long time. But are you ready? What is it to be ready? I want to go. And leave me? I shall find you again. And oh dear, when you come back, I shall be older than you. The idea seemed to delight him. I was still human enough to be sorry that the boy was going of his own free will. But as will is free, I would not make any effort to detain him. Though young in that form, which had not yet had time to grow up in the tenuous world since he came out as a child, yet he was old in thought. Yes, I said, perhaps you can help me along when I also shall be a child again. You see, he went on, with a father like Victor, I shall learn all I want to know about machinery. That is all that he can teach me. But when I am grown, I shall find out for myself many things which he does not know. You remember the little machine I have been working with up in the pattern world? The pattern world. I would call it the mental realm myself, but let's just move on. Yes, when I am back on the earth, I shall make it a reality. Why, it actually runs now with electricity from my fingers. But will it when you have fixed it in material form, in steel, or whatever it is to be made of? Yes, of course it will. It is my invention. I shall be a famous man. But supposing that someone else finds it first? I don't think anybody will. Shall I help you lay a spell around the pattern so that no one can touch it? Could you do that? I think so. Then let us go up there at once, he said, and do it immediately. I may have to leave this world in a day or two. I could not help smiling at the boy's desire to hurry. Doubtless he would be present at that wedding, and I should see little or nothing of him afterwards. We went up to the pattern world, and with his assistance, I drew a circle around the little machine, a spell which, I think, will protect it until he is ready to make his claim. Oh, inspiration! Oh, invention! Genius! Little do the men of earth know the meaning of those words. Perhaps the poet's famous poem was sung before his birth. Perhaps the engineer's invention lay in the pattern world, protected by his spell, while he grew to manhood and advanced in science and made ready to claim it for his own, his prior and spiritual creation. Perhaps when two men discover or invent the same thing at about the same time, one has succeeded in appropriating the design which the other left behind him when he came back to earth. Perhaps, sometimes, both have taken from the invisible creation of a third man who still awaits rebirth. Lion babbled on to me about the life to come and what a charming mother Miss S. would be. She had always been good to him. Perhaps, I said, many of us who return almost immediately, as you hope to do, seek out those who have been good to us in a former life. There is another point, Lionel said. Miss S. is a friend of my own mother, the one I left a few years ago. It would be so good to have her hold my hand again. Do you think she will recognize you? I asked. Who knows? She believes in rebirth. How can you say that? You were so little when you came out. I was 7 years old, and already she had told me that we live many lives on earth. Bless the souls who first brought that belief to the Western world, I explained. And now, my boy, is there anything that I can do for you after you leave me? Yes, of course, you can watch over my new mother and warn her if any danger threatens her or me. Then make me acquainted with her now. We went out into the material world, the boy and I. Already I have told you how we go. He took me to a little house in one of the suburbs of Boston. We entered a room. It was then about 11 o'clock at night upon that part of the earth, and I saw a fair young woman kneeling before her bed, praying to God that he would bless the union of the morrow, which would give her to the man she loved. Lionel went close to her and threw his arms about her neck. She started as if she actually felt the contact and sprang to her feet. Miss S, don't you know me? He cried, but while I could hear him, she evidently could not, though she looked about her in a half-frightened way. Then, supposing that the touch and the presence she had felt were imaginary, she again fell upon her knees and went on with her interrupted prayer. Come away, I said to the boy, and we left her there with dreams and her devotions. That was the last I saw of Lionel. He bade me farewell, saying, I shall stay near her for a few days. Perhaps I shall go back and forth from her to you, but if I do not return, I will meet you again in a few years. Yes, I said, it is affinity and desire which draws souls together, either on earth or in the other world. When I next met my teacher, I told him about Lionel, and I asked him if he thought the boy could come out to me now and then after his life on earth had begun, as an unborn entity in the shelter of his mother's form. Probably not, he replied. If he were an adept soul, he might do that, but with a soul of an even high development, lacking real adeptship, it would be impossible. Yet, I said, men living on earth do come out here in dreams. Yes, but when the soul enters matter, preparing for rebirth, it enters potentiality, if I may use the term, and all its strength is needed in the Herculean effort to form a new body and adjust to it. After birth, when the eyes are opened and the lungs are expanded to the air, the task is easier, and there may be left enough unused energy to bridge the gulf. But, he went on, those who are soon to be mothers are often vaguely conscious of the souls they harbour. Even when they do not grasp the full significance of the miracle that is being performed through them, they have strange dreams and visions, which are mostly glimpses into the past incarnations of the unborn child. They see dream countries where the entity within has dwelt in the past. They feel desires which they cannot explain, reflected desires which are merely the latent yearnings of the unborn one. They experience groundless fears which are its former dreads and terrors. The mother who nourishes a truly great soul during this period of formation may herself grow spiritually beyond her own unaided possibility. While the mother of an unborn criminal often develops strange perversities, quite unlike her normal state of mind. If a woman were sufficiently intelligent and informed, she could judge from her own feelings and ideas what sort of soul was to be her child someday, and prepare to guide it accordingly. More knowledge is needed, here as elsewhere. So, as in all my experiences, I learned something through the passing out of Lionel. Just like to contrast the thoughts of his teacher there with the much more recent accounts from past life and between life regression works, of which we have thousands of examples now. Many souls here do recall passing in and out fairly easily of the womb of their mother, as they're inside as a fetus and they go in and out as a soul. And there seems to be not much difficulty in doing so, at least in the memories of these people exploring these possibilities, these experiences. So I just wanted to contrast that with what the teacher said. Now, can things change in 100 years or so? That's a question we all have to ponder on and puzzle with. But I just thought I'd remind you. Now, an earlier chapter in this same book, Letters from the Light, touches also on this notion of changing focus and moving easily between levels, sub-levels in spirit, which Jürgen touches on several of his experiences. And we'll touch again, I know he will. So here's another view of that same phenomenon. A change of focus. With the guidance of the teacher, during the last few weeks I've been going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. You smile at the veiled reference. But have not certain friends of yours actually feared me as if I were the devil of the book of Job? I think he's still referencing the lady who is, doing the writing, the automatic writing of this book. Now, to be serious, I have been visiting those lands and cities where in former lives I lived and worked among men. One of the many advantages of travel is that it helps a man to remember his former existences. There is certainly a magic in places. I have been in Egypt, in India, in Persia, in Spain, and Italy. I have been in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Greece, Turkey, and many other lands. The Dardanelles were not closed to me recently, when by reason of the war you could not have passed through. There are advantages to almost every condition, even my present one, for the law of compensation holds good. In certain lives of the past, I was a wide traveller. Now you may wonder how it is that I pass easily from this world to yours, seeing into both. But you must remember that your world and mine occupy about the same space, that the plane of the earth's surface is one of the lower and more material planes of our world. Using the word plane as you would use the word layer. Important point that. Earth being yet another plane in the worlds of spirit. As I have said before, there are also places accessible to us which lie at some distance above the Earth's surface. Mansions in the skies, as the phrase goes, are more than figurative. I have only slightly to change my focus at any time to find myself in your world. That I cannot be seen there with the naked eye is no proof that I am not there. Without that change of focus, which is done through an action of will and by knowing the method, I might even be occupying the same space as something in your world and not know it. Note well this point, for it is only half of something which I have to say. The other half is that you also may at any time be, as far as space is concerned, in the immediate neighborhood of interesting things in our world, and not know that you are there. But if you focus to this world, you are more or less conscious of it. So when I, knowing how, focus to your world, I am there in consciousness and can enjoy the varied sights of many cities, the changing aspects of many lands. When I first came out, I could not see my way about the earth very well, but now I can see better. No, I am not going to give you a formula to give to other people by which you or they could change focus at will and enter into relation with this world, because such knowledge at the present stage of human progress would do more harm than good. I merely state the fact and leave the application for those who have the curiosity and the ability to demonstrate it. My object in writing these letters is primarily to convince a few persons to strengthen their certainty in the face of immortality, in the fact of immortality, or the survival of the soul after the bodily change which is called death. Many think they believe who are not certain whether they believe or not. If I can make my presence as a living and vital entity felt in these letters, I will have the effect of strengthening the belief of certain persons in the doctrines of immortality. This is a materialistic age, a large percentage of men and women who have no real interest in life beyond the grave, but they will all have to come out here sooner or later. And perhaps a few will find the change easier, the journey less formidable, by reason of what I shall have taught them. Is it not worthwhile? Is it not worth a little effort on your part as well as on mine? Any person approaching the great change who shall seriously study these letters and lay their principles to heart, and who shall will to remember them after passing out, need not fear anything. We all fail in much that we undertake, but I hope that I shall not fail in this. Do not you fail on your side? I could not do this work without you, nor could you do it without me. That is in answer to the supposition that I am your subconscious mind. I have been in Constantinople and have stood in the very room where I once had a remarkable experience, hundreds of years ago. I have seen the walls, I have touched them, I have read the etheric records of their history, and my own history in connection therewith. I have walked the rose gardens of Persia and have smelled the flowers. The grandchildren, hundreds of times removed, of those roses whose fragrance was an ecstasy me when, watching with the bulbul, I paced there in another form, and with intentions different to mine now. It was the perfume of the roses which made me remember. In Greece also I have lived over the old days. Before their degeneration began, what a race they were. I think that concentration was the secret of their power. The ether around that peninsula is written all over with their exploits, in daring thought as well as in daring action. The old etheric records are so vivid that they shine through the later writings. For you must know that what are called the astral records lie layer against layer everywhere. We read one layer instead of another, either by affinity or by will. It is no more strange than that a man may go amongst the millions of volumes in the British Museum and select the one he wants. The most marvellous things are always simple of explanation if one has the key to unlock their secret. There has been much nonsense written about vibration, but nevertheless truth lies thereabouts. Where there is so much smoke, there also must be fire. In India I have met with yogis in meditation. Do you know why their peculiar way of breathing produces psychic results? No, you do not. Now let me tell you. By holding the breath long, a certain, shall I say, poison is produced in the body, which poison, acting on the psychic nature, changes the vibration. That is all. Volumes have been written about yoga, but have any of them said that? The untrained healthy lungs in ordinary operation get rid of this poison by processes well known to physiologists. That is, in the natural man adjusted to and working contentedly on the material plane. But in order for a man still living on the material plane to become adjusted to the psychic world, a change of vibration is necessary. This change of vibration may be produced by a slight overdose of the above-mentioned poison. Is it dangerous? Yes, to the ignorant. To those who are learned in its use, it is no more dangerous than most of the drugs in the pharmacopoeia. Another time I will tell you about other secrets which I have discovered going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. Changing of focus. It works in meditation. It works in out-of-body experience. It works when you're dead and want to come back here for a little visit. It is a universal principle. Back to Jürgen. Vistas of Infinity, and a very interesting experience from April 2009, which he calls an advanced alien species. I got up to meditate about 5:30 a.m. My mind was still, but after about an hour, the thought of my father, who I'd lost as a 9-year-old boy, popped into my head. As I felt quite sleepy, I decided to leave my meditation and go back to bed. I succumbed to sleep almost instantly, but equally quickly became fully lucid again when I found myself walking along a road. I stopped for a moment, considering the possibility of being there physically. The only way to be sure was to perform the hovering test, which I did. As I hovered, I had full waking consciousness. Again the thought of my father popped into my head. I called his name and was instantly overwhelmed by intense sadness. Images of the day he died flooded into my head. I was no longer standing in the road, but transported back into my past, into a darkened room where I witnessed my father dying when I was a 9-year-old boy. The sunlight of the beautiful May day was blocked out by heavy drawn curtains. I was all present, exactly as it happened so many decades before. Though this time I had no age, I was just myself, an awareness in the room. I saw my father's giant jaundiced face, which was little more than a skull covered with skin, and yellow eyes in their sockets. I cried. I did not cry when I was the 9-year-old boy. I just handed him the bag with the shells I had collected on the beach at the children's summer camp I had been sent to. Then I had been in a state of shock, and he couldn't see the shells I handed to him. So I just put the bag on his pillow next to his head and left the room in shock, without thoughts. But now I cried because I had touched on an intense pain. My past had become my present, and this present was hard reality. Everything was as I experienced it as a child. I was overcome with the intense pain of knowing that I was about to lose somebody, but the 9-year-old boy could not grasp the right feeling for it. What it was like to lose somebody in front of your eyes who he had loved so dearly, who had never shown him any anger, only love. Papa, my awareness in the darkened room called. I called, silently, then crying. The pain was unbearable. Just then the ceiling above me opened, and through a hatch a bright light shone down upon me and tried to pull me up. But the sadness had glued me to the floor and would not let me rise. At this point I struggled to keep waking awareness and tried to rationalize that my father had died more than 50 years ago. But it was futile. My suffering was as intense as it was present and real, not a memory. Then my awareness was challenged by a hive of activity around me that threatened to blur out my waking awareness and draw me into a dream narrative, because it all became too much. Against all odds, I succeeded in maintaining lucidity. I could not let this go. I noticed that I was surrounded by a group of people who showed great concern for the emotional state I was in. They asked me who I was and what I was doing here. They were all strangers to me. I also noticed that I was no longer in the darkened room where my father had died, but in a place I could not recognize. My attention was attracted by the sound of paper rustling. I woke up in my bed. Next to me was Julia reading the Sunday paper. She had been waiting for me to get up so we could have breakfast together. I apologized and told her that I had to go back in order to find my father. She smiled and nodded. In order not to be disturbed, I decided to go back to my meditation room, hoping to find my way back into the same lucid state of my out-of-body experiences. Settling into my meditation chair, I closed my eyes, knowing that by holding on to the last sequence I might just find my way back into lucidity again. It wasn't instant, but instead of meditating, I allowed myself to drop off into sleep again to find a more natural way back with the intent of gaining lucidity. I then totally surrendered to the forces that might be and dropped off almost instantly and was back in the room again with the same people and instantly back in full waking awareness. This time they seemed to have lost interest in me and there was no longer any sign of sadness either. I started following their discussion telepathically. One of the topics was the art of flying. My intent of meeting my dad had gone by the wayside as I again struggled to maintain lucidity and gradually felt myself being pulled into some nonsensical dream narrative. Then, without warning, I was again fully awake as if something or someone had made a deliberate attempt to wake me up. But I was not in my meditation chair. I was in the room again with the group of strangers as before. But my waking consciousness now was astounding and made me feel that my normal life had been little more than a fantasy or film script. It was not only that, I felt as if I had been injected with an extra level of clarity and intelligence. My state of super-presence seemed to be linked to the presence of the central character of the group, who stood out and commanded all my attention. He was a very tall man dressed in a long, incredibly attractive gown, which seemed to change pattern and colour every time he moved. My first impression was that the fabric was thought-sensitive in some mysterious way, and changed as it picked up feelings around it. But above all, the most noticeable feature was the colour of the man's skin, which was whitish, translucent blue, very soft, diffusing the light as velvet does. His strange, almost non-human look made him strikingly attractive. The feeling this evoked in me was the same I sometimes find in beautiful animals, which are not aware at all of their attractiveness. This man too carried a sublime and modest innocence, while at the same time bearing himself with a confidence and a natural nobility. As I observed him addressing his group, not paying any attention to their mental discussion, the thought occurred to me that I could be watching a specimen of our human species at a future stage of our evolution, maybe 1,000,000 years from now. I knew I was wrong when he suddenly looked at me, and I realized instantly I was looking into the eyes of an alien species. The resemblance to humans was not only the resemblance to humans was only very superficial. Realizing this, I noticed his appearance shifting slightly, and that his mutating gown was just part of what he was. His gaze captured my attention with such intensity that my awareness acquired yet a new aspect of super lucidity and a clarity of mind I didn't know existed. While holding my gaze firmly, he sent me a batch of information telepathically. It was packaged in such kindness that I instantly felt a great wave of warmth and affection rolling towards him. There was no smile in response, just a quiet acceptance that let me know that love was the accepted norm of communication among his species. He sent me images of his home planet. Before I had even formed a question to ask, he had already answered everything I was barely aware of. So intense and packed with information was the level of communication that it dissolved any boundaries between our species that might have been there. I had never experienced such total and boundless communication in all my life, and with it I felt a benevolent invitation to accompany him to his home planet. It was only now that I started looking around to find out where I was, but there were no features, other than a space of light that dissolved into mistiness around us. Half expecting to be led to an alien spaceship, I was surprised when he told us to be seated on a fairly simple gossamer mat, which, as if by magic, materialized underneath us. It was mostly white and 2 or 3 feet thick, with ample space for all of us to claim a comfortable area. There were no controls. As soon as we were seated, our transport began to move rather fast, without as much as lifting up into the air and into black space, which I had anticipated. Instead of the black void of space, we soared into a blue sky with streaks of light shooting past us, the only indication that we were moving. I asked where we were going and was told that it would be traveling the equivalent of 10 million light years towards another galaxy unrelated to our own. The blue space did not change at all. It was a constantly pleasurable journey. I could not tell whether the sounds accompanying us were the results of our heightened emotions, or whether my sublime feelings were fanned by the sounds and the shoots of light, or the speed, which was exhilarating. I asked why the space was not black, and was given to understand that space was not black at all, and that we were not traveling through physical space in any case, but a superior dimension of the physical. In response to my question as to why we had to travel at all through space in this dimension and were not instantly projected, which I had always assumed was the possibility of higher dimensional travel, I was given to understand, although we were traveling unimaginably fast, space was still a reality. He drew my attention to a concept that our current space journey still adhered to the reality of this higher dimension, which was much vaster than the lower physical worlds. I was then provided with instant access to higher dimensional physics and natural laws that somehow made sense, which I failed to comprehend fully and could not retain. In a nutshell, I had insights that, on a higher dimensional level, laws of nature still applied, and that not everything was a matter of thinking and materializing. We were still subject to it, and we could not simply override it by a mere focus of intent or wish. By this time I was more taken to the extreme pleasure of traveling. Space had changed somewhat and was now extremely beautiful. Luminous clouds drifted past us, nebulae, lights, and gigantic stars, and more radiant and magnificent lights. I became absorbed by the splendor of subtle ecstasy rising within me. We finally landed without my even noticing exactly how and where. All I noticed around me was what looked like an oversized control room, the size of a modern football stadium. The only thing I could identify with a semblance of certainty were drifting lights. Even now I was painfully aware how I would struggle to describe all this when returning to my physical reality, and how I would record the experience. I was concerned how unbelievable my attempts would sound and how limited my language was and possible metaphors. Aware of this, I clutched at certain features that would give a semblance to any cultural equivalents. But it was not possible. Nothing from my old culture, even with its modern science fiction film set designs, would be able to do it justice. I was simply stranded in an environment that was ungraspable, evading any frame of reference. Whatever words I would use in the end, the one fact which left me without any doubt whatsoever was that I was not dreaming, was not even lucidly dreaming. This was a hard and tangible reality in waking awareness mind, a reality unvisited by man. I was in the presence of an alien species in an alien world with no words to describe what I saw. Realizing this, I found the greatest magic was in not what I saw, but in the fact that I was so wide awake, in possession and control of all my waking awareness faculties. This I found was a miracle beyond comprehension. Meanwhile, I noticed other people milling around my host, treating him with great homage and respect. I was hardly paid any attention to and was taken away by the powerful charisma and aura of this being. Never in my life had I encountered an entity of such strength and inner power. My breath was taken by his appearance and the fluidity of his gestures and movements. I could have sworn his shape was changing as he dynamically expressed himself to his audience, flowing from subtle shape to shape alteration, which was harmonious and powerful, without ever losing for a moment his underlying persona and charisma. What a way of self-expression, I thought. What kind of species have I visited? What is its evolutionary history? Why have they brought me here? And above all, why me? Although my host was the main focus of everyone's attention, most of all mine, I watched the others now with more interest and discovered each individual carried an unmistakable yet humble nobility, behaving with sublime poise as if every movement counted. No gesture was in vain, all fluidly harmonized perfectly from person to person, like a swarm of fish perhaps, in total synchronicity, harmony brought to its ultimate perfection. How primitive and crude I felt as a representative of my own species. How unpolished, base, and primeval. Among this noble race, I felt painfully ashamed and humbled, aware of my almost blind animal origin. As if noticing my discomfort, this noble warrior and host of mine addressed me with great poise, compassion, and kindness. I felt a powerful stream of love radiating from him towards me. It was only now that I noticed all this fuss and milling around of his entourage had been to prepare him for a grand ceremony. I became fully aware of this as he addressed me. It was the purpose of my visit, my invitation to learn and to note that mankind is not the only intelligent species, and we're not even intelligent compared to his. You may wonder what all this is about, was his thought sent towards me with a gentle nod and a smile. I would like you to witness the mating ritual of our kind, to put it in its most simple terms. He told me he was going to merge, meld, or unite in some kind of courtship and union with a female aspect of his species. A concept like mother was lit in my consciousness. The female aspect of his species would not be what I might be expecting at all. He told me that his species on this dimensional level needed to procreate, just as we did on Earth, as a necessity to safeguard a future generation. It became clear to me that each being was subject to a life cycle, just as we are, and that they would progress to a higher plane when their experience here was completed. He also told me that I was the first human being to witness this. I was stunned, without fully absorbing the significance and the enormous privilege of this event. I asked him where the mother was. I was told she was actually in the very heart center of the galaxy, and that we would travel there as we did before we arrived. With that, we boarded our gossamer craft. My host now looked even more majestic, dressed in a multi-layered shimmering gown. His entourage, too, was appropriately attired for this incredible occasion. Everyone radiated nobility and uncompromising attractiveness and beauty. After a short trip, we arrived at an ocean of light, which I immediately considered to be the center my host had referred to. Sitting in the midst of this swirling light, I beheld a gigantic object of gyrating pattern and colors radiating a beauty which took my breath away. Without being told, I knew that what I saw was the mother. What was mind-shattering was the enormous discrepancy between male and female, as there were literally no resemblance between the two genders at all. Not only was the female aspect at least 10 to 20 times bigger than its male counterpart, but the difference was as if between two worlds. I was strangely reminded of some of the Earth's natural world, where a diminutive male courts an overwhelming female, and yet the female before me was anything but an animal or a creature. It was a powerhouse radiating love and uplifting blessings to anything that approached its gigantic aura. The mother had no recognizable features or appearance whatsoever, but I was mostly acutely aware of what was an overwhelming aspect of femininity, and that it radiated an irresistible attraction. I can only attempt to describe her by suggesting that you consider the most beautiful flower imaginable, opening its petals and breathing out the most enchanting perfume, while continuously performing a dance with its multitude of leaves, exuberances, changing patterns, and radiations of cascades of lights and sounds so sweet that those alone could take you off into a completely different world. What was before me was the super aspect of femininity, the core essence of it, the absolute perfection of life-giving source. I then observed my host opening his arms and drifting towards her as if being invisibly carried. As he drew closer, his aura lit up, and he was received by the mother into her inner sanctuary, where he disappeared. What followed from there was a spectacular uniting ritual, which was a song, a dance, and a radiation of joy and ecstasy for all the surrounding witnesses to benefit from. Gently turning, the two were united as one. I felt powerfully what was taking place. I felt a burst of bliss and great clarity that was radiating from the center, and we all bowed down and sank to our knees. I followed suit instinctively without thought and in reverence for what was taking place. The benediction that radiated out seemed to spread throughout the galaxy. It was so powerful. I was overawed by the privilege of having witnessed this event, plucked from a distant primitive planet, a society so unevolved and primitive that it made me feel like a mere insect by comparison. I had been ushered into the most intimate sanctuary of a complete alien species to give testimony that there are advanced alien life forms beyond our primitive Earth, and that there is a life more unimaginable than any naturalist would be able to fathom, and yet, in essence, so very human too. I knew I was here to witness and to record one of the greatest magical wonders of our universe, the generation of new life, the wonder of pre-creation and cre-creation, the essence of what all life is at its core. Well, there we go. What a powerful experience that was. And what a long video we have with us today. 43 minutes. My. I hope you've enjoyed it and haven't fallen asleep to the mellifluous tones of, of my chatter. And until next time, which will be very soon, I bid you all farewell.